Cultural diffusion and modern Korean culture. The colonial period.
In this following portion, we will examine the cultural changes that occurred during the colonial period and how different cultural influences, again, adapted to the local context and helped shape Korean culture.
Why do you think it is important to Koreans to identify the cultural differences between Korea and Japan?
The colonial period lasting from 1910 to 1945 meant that Japanese culture was the hegemonic influence or the dominating influence of the time. And with the establishment of the government general in Seoul, this meant that Seoul became the hub for the Japanese, the headquarters for the Japanese colonial administration. We see the main colonial administrative building here, and this was built within the palace, the Gyeongbok Palace. In front of the palace, so from a southern view, it blocked the palace itself. But because this was the headquarters for the Japanese colonial administration, this also meant that Seoul developed quite rapidly and was urbanized. But because many Koreans chose not to stay within Korea under Japanese control, many of them left the country and went to other places, creating the Korean diaspora. So some of them moved to Japan or other parts of the Japanese Empire. Some of them moved to Manchuria and China. Some moved even further to Russia and the United States. And there they also were influenced by the local cultures. And once they returned after the colonial period, would bring with them those cultural influences. So if we look at cultural diffusion during the colonial period, it is quite evident that the influences occurred in the areas of language, food, and architecture. So for example, what we see pictured here is the old City Hall of Seoul, which still exists today. And this is very characteristic of Japanese colonial style architecture. After Japan started to participate in World War II, there was an increase of Japanese control over the colony. And this is where we really begin to see the Japanese forcefully trying to impose their culture, their ideology on the Korean people. It became increasingly more militaristic, and Koreans were forced to assimilate. So for example, they were forced to attend ceremonies at the National Shinto Shrine in order to practice the Shinto and to pay their respects to the Japanese emperor. And this is embodied in the slogan Naisen Itai, or Japan and Joseon as one.
These are the keywords for this class: colonization, independence, assimilation,